This is Gregg Hurwitz, and you're watching the Crew Reviews.
Hey, Sean. How lucky are we to have another one of our favorite authors stop by for a chat about his latest thriller? We have Gregg Hurwitz. Welcome back to the Crew Review, sir.
Thanks. It's good to see you boys. It's been a minute.
It
It has.
has. It definitely has. But I was going to ask you if you could give us a non-scary version of this book for what your fans are going to get when they're reading it. But screw it. Why don't you go ahead and frighten us a little bit? Because I was kind of frightened at the end of it.
You were?
A little bit, a little bit.
Well, it's the gentlest opening to an Orphan X book probably that we've had, because the first mission he gets when that encrypted 855 to nowhere number rings is there's a little girl who has a missing dog. And I actually have him make fun of it to himself because he says that, it's like an Encyclopedia Brown adventure, Orphan X in the case of the missing dog. So
Right.
he's been, when we find him, he's on his heels, man. He met, confronted in some way. We don't know what the hell happened, but the man claiming to be his father, who might possibly be his father, and as an orphan, Evan never knew him, never met him. And all we know is we catch up to him in the aftermath, and he's just like shattered in a way we haven't seen. And we don't know why, and we don't know what happened. So part of the process for him to put himself back together again is he's going to start small. He takes this little dinky, annoying case. He's plodding along in it. And next thing you know, he runs into an escalating series of disasters that what's really fun with this is it's the longest sustained suspense sequence I've ever written. There's like a 50-page chunk where he's moving along with this, and all of a sudden it escalates, and then it escalates, and then it escalates, and it just keeps going. And so I kind of coil the spring early on and just let it go. And so by the time we kind of turn the corner and recognize that we're in a much bigger story than we've ever been in with him, we're a little winded, I hope.
Yeah, I definitely winded. And I think there's one point where because you take readers on a roller coaster, which is pretty cool, and you bring them back to I don't want to give away too much, but you bring him back to like the HOA meeting, and he's like ticking off all the things that he had gone through, and I just read all that stuff, and you're just like, holy f, like that's amazing. It's like he just went through all that. Now he's trying to get a splinter out of his foot or something. But so you start Lone Wolf out with Evan, like you said, out of sorts, and obviously it's an Orphan X novel, so it can't stay that way. And you mentioned that it starts off small, like Joey. I remember she mouths to him like, start small, like get yourself back into rhythm here, get back to the commandments. But was that like when you were crafting the story, when you were envisioning the story, was that the conscious decision, or did you have to go back and like create that?
No, I knew I wanted to start with him. And look, he's all fucked up in the aftermath of whatever went down with this man who might have been his dad. We don't know what happened. There's a bit of a cliffhanger about that ends the last Orphan, the last book. And so we just find him undone in a way he's not been. I mean, he drank to excess, and Orphan X always has one glass of vodka, sometimes a few sips. It's like a purification ceremony. But he was drinking like you two guys, So by the time we catch up to him, he's just a mess in a way we've never seen. And Joey catches up to him, and it's all kind of, on the one hand, it's like deeply personal stakes because he's been taken apart, but Tommy and her just, giving him a hard time about it all. And this little thing starts, but I knew it was going to just slingshot into something huge. And he finds himself in this world with, like, first of all, a female assassin called the Wolf, who's this mirror image of him. He's left-handed, she's right-handed. They have male, female. They have similar gear. It's almost like he's looking into this distorted mirror. And she's as dangerous as anybody who he's been up against since the orphan days, since other orphans. So it's very, very intense. And then, he's trying to figure out who's behind her, who's behind this sort of, quicksand that he stepped into. And he finds himself coming across a couple technocrats who are, genius visionaries in various fields, including AI, who are kind of playing with and pulling the marionette strings for the entire world, basically, you and I included. And so we start from this scruffy, shitty little dog that has gone missing in his quest to try and help and find it. And we wind up with, someone dealing with the marionette strings that are pulling the cords or pulling the levers of power in ways we don't even see, that just move invisibly and unseen around us.
That's the scary part I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first I want to say that I just contrary to your earlier comment, I managed to successfully complete dry January. So
Well, I did, Sean. I did. I
Did
totally
you?
did. I did. I borrowed days from March and April and July and August.
No, and I don't want to get too far away from the plot, but I want to get into character for a minute, because since I read the first book in the series, Orphan X books are appointment reading. They're appointment reading for me. That I know for all three of us.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not saying it to flatter you. It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
One of the characters and series that sets the bar in the genre, no question. But with that, I feel like I know Evan pretty well. You read a guy 7-8 books, you kind of get a sense of him until I open each book, and then I discover new facets of the man. We've talked about his extensive development over the series with you, but it's continual, so we can keep talking about it. But how often are you, as his creator, surprised by his choices and his actions? And in a broader sense, has he exceeded your expectations from when you created him?
There's something wild that's happening with me when I'm writing this series. I used to write, and I've been at this a long time. I just turned 50 not so long ago, but I've been writing. I mean, I wrote parts of The Tower, my first book, which isn't that great, when I was 19. It's like no one should ever be held accountable for anything they said or thought when they're 19, like let alone have it in print. But I've been doing this a really long time. And what used to happen was I'd finish a book, like those Hitchcock standalones that I did, like You're Next. Mm-hmm. And I'd finish the whole book and I'd look back and go, oh, that's what that was about. That's what I was working through. It was like about my, fear and enhanced feelings of vulnerability about becoming a parent, let's say. Mm-hmm. But it was only evident to me afterwards. There's a quotation from Joan Didion that I love where she says, I write to know what I think. It's such a good quote, and so I was sort of figuring it that way. And one of the things that happened with Orphan X for the first time is I'm sort of like the things that I'm working on in my life or puzzling over in the culture or in politics or about like AI, right? I've been very involved in kind of deep diving what that's going to mean for our creative future, for the ways that we make meaning. And even in my own life of sort of taking apart who I am and trying to reconstitute that, you have to let parts of yourself die off to allow room to move forward. And one of the things that started to happen is it's like this dialogue that's happening as I'm writing the books, where sometimes I'm a little ahead of Evan, sometimes he's a little ahead of me. But I'm so engaged, you guys, when I'm writing these now. It's like I'm having more fun than I've ever had in my career. And I kind of can't believe it, 9 books in, and it's just so fun because I'm kind of, I think I used to do it more around research for crazy shit. Like I went undercover to mind control cults and up into stunt airplanes. And I still do that. I still do the research. But a lot of this are like these sort of knots, psychological or philosophical knots that I'm dealing with that I get to tug at and unfold in a form of a thriller. And it's just a blast. And so, yeah, I'm constantly surprised. I'm constantly engaged and challenged, and I better be, because if I'm not when I'm writing it, y'all will be pretty bored reading it.
Definitely, we were not bored reading this, and you can actually, I think you can tell in the voice. It's the voice. Obviously, it's you, and the writing's the same, but you can tell it's a little bit more lighthearted in points, specifically when you come to like the Joey and Evan interactions. And I'm always curious, like I'm always thinking, which one is more you? Is it Evan? Is it Joey? Is it someone else? But anyway,
I contain multitudes, gentlemen.
So going back to the story, Jack John said the hardest part of training Evan wasn't teaching him how to be an assassin, but keeping him human. Did you find that difficult when you first started writing the Orphan X thrillers, keeping Evan human? And is that why you continue to add things and people into the story, like Sophia, like even Andre, even the stupid dog?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because that is one thing I will say in hindsight. I never start the books thinking, oh, what's a philosophical issue that interests me? The first stuff that I kind of grab out of the ether that comes to my brain are scenes, action sequences, lines of dialogue, conflicts, character notes. It's always specific. But that is really the key to the series. I mean, that's the line around which I say it in every book. That's the line around which the series coalesces. And had he trained him to be just a killer, to be a true believer, his life would have been a lot easier, right? All of the tension and dramatic action comes from Evan trying to figure out how to be more than what he is. So for me, looking back at Orphan X, the series sort of starts at the point that he realizes in some ways that he's this sort of archetypal figure like Clint Eastwood, or Clint Eastwood as a human is an archetypal fictional character also. But he's Reacher, he's Bond, he's something, but it's like he realizes he's Pinocchio, but he wants to be a real boy. And the show is about the story, the books, book after book after book, is his process of becoming. His training taught him everything except he never learned to speak the strange language of intimacy. And that's what undoes him again and again. And he has to figure out to crack his heart open more and more to try and accommodate people like Mia, like Peter, like Joey, like Aragon Oria, like there's more and more characters that are coming in that make him, despite the title of this book, which make him less and less of a lone wolf. And that process of him opening up is really interesting to me because he's never really placed on a huge pedestal. Everyone in the book does one thing better than he does, and he has to bring the totality of who he is to every mission in a way. So yeah, I mean, his life would have been easier if Jack had just trained him to be a true believer, and the books probably would have been easier to write.
They'd be boring though. I mean, they would be boring. You'd have no Joey,
Well,
you'd have no Tommy.
no, they wouldn't be boring. They'd be forgettable. And
Forgettable. Yeah. Okay.
I think
Yeah.
we talk about this a lot off air, Greg. And again, I'm going to pay you a compliment to your face, but we read a lot of books and plot wise and action pieces and set pieces. There's some really exciting stuff and really well executed. And as soon as I'm done reading it, I put it on the shelf and maybe we have an interview. And after that, I might never think of that book again. Your books resonate and they echo. They really do. Let's see, where the hell? Dark Horse hit me in ways that I just unexpected. Just about, I think about the redemption factor in that book made me think, in societal, again, you weren't trying to make it an issue book or you just told a great story, but they resonate. And I think that it goes back to the heart of this. And this might be more of a mechanical question about what you guys just talked about. But each Orphan X book brings elements of emerging technologies to them that appeal to the science geek within inside. And they add to the plot of the brain of the story. But the strongest parts are always the heart of your writing for me is the deep human connections that Evan either makes or doesn't make, because sometimes the one he doesn't make are just as powerful. But my question for our writers out there is how do you manage to balance each of those elements so well? Like, is it the head and the heart? Is it an intentional process, or do you think it's just your writerly intuition, your storytelling gene?
Well, one of the questions that gets asked a lot is, do you think what's more important in story, character or plot?
Right.
And for me, where I start and look at everything is that plot is character in motion. That's all it is. And so every Evan Smoak scene, his dialogue has to be distinct. Every fight sequence has to be an Orphan X fight sequence. It can't be swapped out for a Gray Man or a Bourne or a Swagger. The way he approaches everything and does everything has to be distinct to him. So it's a really good way, for writers to think about this. When you're writing a scene, you're working with your character. If your character reacts how the majority of people would react or says the thing that the majority of people would say, then you've not gotten specific enough. And so for me, I think that balance and that part of putting him in a circumstance that the way that he will react to everything is specific, is idiosyncratic. That's the process where we get to more and more, because then I'm writing him through as a real person. And that means all of his flaws and facets are visible to other people and hit other people and come back at him. I'm not trying to make him perfect because it's far from it. I mean, the books are very much about all the ways in which he's not, all the ways in which he might be one of the bravest people we know operationally, but he's constantly remarking on his own cowardice when compared to, let's say, Ida Rosenbaum, the elderly Jewish woman who's somewhat strident, who lives upstairs, who may or may not be based on my deceased grandmother. But like she lost her husband, and he's looking at these pictures in her room of her and thinking about what she lost and what it means to live alone week after week and month after month after committing your life and sharing your life with somebody else. And so he's constantly reflecting on his own sort of cowardice and shortcomings in other regards. So that's a big part of it for me, is to make sure he's not just adored by everybody, but that ultimately he is sort of the assimilating ego at the center of it. Joey's a better hacker, and Stojak's a better marksman, and you get on the list. But at the end of the day, he's got to bring everything that he is to a mission in order to sort of steer through the improbable shades of gray, because the books don't allow him to have his black and white orphan thinking of just the 10 commandments. He's always fucking up the 10 commandments and breaking them, right?
Or forgetting them.
Yeah. Well, the series starts, Orphan X starts with the first mission where he breaks all 10 of the commandments, the very first book in the series. It's about his movement into a new definition of himself, into a new way of making meaning in the second half of his life, and what he hopes will be the second half of his life. And I think that's something, look, I don't think it's a coincidence I started writing Orphan X when I was just about to hit 40. For me, that was the age of, we know all the shit we shouldn't do. We know all the stuff that we're a pain in the ass, habits that aren't good for us. What's really hard to let go of, though, well, that one's arguably, that can also be helpful now and then. But the things that are really hard to let go of are the things that are our personality traits, or our stories, or our survival instincts or mechanisms that actually did so much for us, right? And now maybe they don't serve us if we're married with kids in a different place in our life. But letting go of these things that were immensely valuable, that gave us self-definition, that brought us to where we are, that oriented us in the world, those are very hard to let die and just hope that something else will come along. And I think so. I was at the process of, not consciously yet, probably, but I was thinking about all those things. And it's a lot of what Evan's doing, of like, if I'm not just an orphan who operates by 10 commandments that are rigid, black and white, who am I? If I break all these rules, what's going to fill their place? What way can I orient myself in the world that I still will feel safe, that I'll still feel like I have a means towards self-definition and meaning? And I do think that's something that a lot of us go through.
It's growing up a bit. You were mentioning how you don't want to have Evan, if you read his action scene, you don't want people to think it's a gray man or Ivy Swagger or whatever. Would you I mean, I already know your answer. Like, do you have to read those stories so that you don't replicate those stories, those characters?
I don't think I have to read them. I mean, look, they're terrific, and so I love reading them. But that's their own. Greeny's doing his own thing, and it's like that's from him. I mean, it's funny. You have a lot of writers who watch your podcast. The one thing that's really important is, when we talk about that, is the one thing that everyone has to bring to a story is the unique way that we see the world. That's it. And so if you're saying, look, I want to take Greeny, I'll do 33% Greeny and 33% Brad Thor and 34%, Lee Child, and here's my work product. It's just not going to work. It's not that it's an amalgam. And I think what works for people, like when you're reading Greeny, you're reading him, right? You're reading what's coming out of him in a way that's very particular. And so for me, a lot of it is just making sure that I'm true to myself, and I'm seeing these characters. I'm seeing when he's dealing with Mia, what's Mia going to call him out on? So Mia's those of you who haven't read the series, she's a single mother, district attorney who lives downstairs from him. And she's got an 8-year-old boy who very much admires Evan, and they have a lot of chemistry, Evan and Mia, but if she ever really knew who he was, she'd have to arrest him. So it's a very complicated situation between them. So But what I'm trying to do is figure out Mia as a specific person and Evan as a specific person. What happens when they're colliding? And that's the thing. It's about writing particular people. Like I don't write female characters or black characters or Hispanic characters or Jewish characters. I'm writing a character. I'm writing an individual. And so if I can get my brain around that, then all of a sudden it becomes almost like where you're watching two of your buddies who are kind of talking shit, or someone's giving somebody a hard time about something, and all the nuance comes out in different ways, and all the ways that people are different are what shine the light that make all those facets glitter. And then that's just really fun because then you're hanging out with people.
That's what it feels like, Sean. Like when we're reading his books, it feels like reconnecting with Evan, and I'm like the third person, like a drone on his right shoulder, just watching everything happen, and it's fascinating.
Well, to your point, Greg, the banter between those two, and throwing Tommy, they all insult somebody lovingly in a very specific way, and again, it goes back to reading as many books as we had to read the last few years. I mean, we didn't have to read them, but we chose to read them. Reading as many as we did, it's like sometimes you can strip away the names of your characters, and I know who's talking, and that's true of such a very small group of books that we read every year. And no,
it's a small group.
I think that's why we've connected so much with these books, is just that these, again, I don't think of Evan as a book character. I think of Evan as a guy. I feel like that Evan's out there. And when you've created that in the reader, I think, you've really done your job, because I don't think of him as a guy in a book on a page. I literally can picture everything about this man, and that's not just.
Oh, thank you, man. That delights me.
I mean, definitely wouldn't want to go up against him, though. Fuck that. Fuck that. Want to be on his wrong side.
Be pals with. I mean,
it's so
yeah, I want to drink vodka with him, hang out with him.
I don't want to cross Joey either, because she'd freaking
no.
my online.
One of the things that's been so fun with it too is like I made him so kind of Evan's so forgettable. Like everything about him is to be an orphan. So one of the lines I have, I say average size, average build, just a normal guy, not too handsome. I say in every book, he's not too handsome. And, in some ways he just blends in. Bond is so charming and he's so handsome. And everything with Evan is that he's just like designed to sort of recede into the background. And so that's also a really fun part of writing him or spending time with him, because he's never ego forward in a way. He's always stepping back. So, I at times wish I was less loquacious, like him, to be a little more taciturn. But it delights me that he seems like someone you guys could hang out with.
Oh,
he reminds, a lot of this was from Evan. I mean, part of it is I based him on me, because I'm like average size, average. My shoe size is 10.5. I'm either a large medium or a medium large. Like everything can fit me off a rack. And I have a tiny wife. She's like 5, maybe 1 on a good day. And I always joke she's like my pocket wife, like her feet are so small. I don't know how she stays upright without just falling over like a Bobo doll. And, it's just so funny. And so with Evan, part of it was, it's like, he's dead average. Reacher's hulking. You're not going to, if you walk into a diner and Reacher's there, your eyes are not going to move past him. But a lot of that was based on some of my friends in the Spec Ops community, some SEALs guys in particular, who, one of my friends is a littler guy. He looks like if you took Tom Cruise and put him in the dryer and shrunk him down even more. And he's just really like smiley, like super easygoing, super clean cut.
You never pegged those
guys. For fun, since he's left the teams, he'll run high altitude super marathons where you run a marathon every day for 6 consecutive days. And I had another buddy who was a sniper who, had kind of long mullety hair and a baseball cap. And when they were doing a mission, when they were in Afghanistan, they would just send him in with a backpack like a college kid who was getting lost. Like he would just go walking in, and they just didn't look like much. And we would be out sometimes drinking in LA. I still remember one time there was a bunch of big badass like outlaw bikers, and things were starting to get kind of heated. There was like some joshing, and then it got serious. I'll never forget this. My buddy who's a sniper just looked at one of the guys who outweighed him by like 100 pounds. And he just looked at him. and the guy just saw that there's something different in the eyes that you just wouldn't have noticed before, and kind of sat down, like they took some space, and instead of this escalating into a bar fight, like he kind of understood it's not a bully situation of someone that you're going to push around. um
It's
and
cool
so
to
that's
have
been a
that
lot of
juice,
it is,
man. That's cool to have that juice and to have those type of friends where you're like, yeah, I'm with these fuckers.
yeah, well, and some of them are huge, like, probably my best friend from the teams is a big old galump who is a 60 gunner. Like, he's so big, his arms don't taper at the wrist, they just turn into fingers. I mean, he's just a beast. So I call him a galump. So some of the guys you go rolling around with and you can tell, like, oh, you're someone not to be tangled with. But I was always interested in those other guys where it's a bearing, right? It's a look, it's like what's behind the eyes. And watching that in action a few times was really something.
It's pretty cool.
Um, yeah.
Pretty cool. Jumping back to the story, so there's an element of AI to the story, as you mentioned. I'd love to hear your personal thoughts on it. Do you think it's a force of good, or is it just going to get really weird and really bad for humanity?
Okay. So I got a lot of thoughts around AI. I mean, I've been researching this book forever. And I've been diving into it forever. I think it's going to change a lot. The biggest thing I will say is it's what's our relation to it going to be? What's our relationship going to be? And so, to use a Fantasia reference, we want to make sure that we're Sorcerer Mickey, not the eyeless mops hauling the buckets of water. Like, someone's going to be running things. And in a way, in Lone Wolf, I wanted to show not like a Skynet version of how AI could take over the world, but I wanted to show in a very real way, how we can get caught in these webs where we're being controlled by forces beyond our understanding, and the people who think that they're in charge of those webs are also caught in forces that are beyond their understanding. I wanted to show that through, literally, to start to get us to comprehend and think about it. As pertains to creativity, I have kind of there's three things I think that are called for and are very important. And the first is transparency. I'm been the co-president of International Thriller Writers for 3 years now, coming up on 4, which will be my last year. And we did a poll. We did a bunch of polling, authors and readers. 97% of readers do not want to read a book by a dead author. So if you could say, I'm going to push a button and give me a new Raymond Chandler book, people don't want it.
Nope.
We want to know what it is that we're imbibing. Or if somebody's going to use it for something, we want to know what. Now, like I talked about having it in its proper place, spell check and Google. There's a lot of ways that we use AI already. I use some AI as a kind of research assistant who I have to double check with some frequency, because now and then it gets naughty and I'll just make shit up.
Yeah, that's true.
But so transparency is really key. But the other thing that's really key is that we forget when we think about, oh my God, we're going to be overtaken by content, is what we love, what makes us feel alive, what engages us is human excellence. That's what turns us on. And so when Deep Blue was created, we wanted to see how Kasparov fared. We didn't want to tune in to watch Deep Blue play Deep Blue, right? I don't want to watch an AI basketball game. I want to watch Michael Jordan soar, right? So we're drawn to that. I love knowing that Dennis Lehane or Megan Abbott has written a book, and that where they are and what the book is represents a sort of charting movement of them through time in a way that can't necessarily be replicated. So I do think that that's key. And the third and most important thing by far, I believe, is community. And so on the one hand, if you think about, let's say I want a new Raymond Chandler book, and I go, look, okay, my IQ is 115. Let's dial the vocab to that. Let's make it half the length. I don't want any violence against kids. You punch your button, you get your bespoke book, and we all get our own entertainment. On the one hand, that sounds amazing, right? That you get everything you want right when you want it. On the other hand, it is actually a version of hell, right? It's Pinocchio's Pleasure Island, or it's C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce, right? Where everybody is separated from an overarching narrative and from each other. And so there's a version, if we were to pursue that, to say, look, everyone's going to get their own entertainment that's suited to them, that we're all floating around in our little pods, like in Pixar's WALL-E, being fed and integrated and we're removed from an overarching narrative and from each other increasingly. We don't know what it is that we want. And all you have to do is look at the statistics and numbers on, like, I don't know, pornography, let's say, with young men, right? Who are like, it's just wiping them out, because on the one hand, you're like, I can get anything I want whenever I want it all the time. And it's like, yeah, what's the cost now? Like, they don't know how to interact with members of the opposite sex, right? There's all sorts of depression and anxiety. There's all sorts of things. So the notion that we just create, that we in some ways can lead or can be algorithmically, assessed and be led to the things we most want. Like, we don't know what the fuck we want. How do we know what we want, right? And that's part of the problem. And, we see it all the time with news or with social media, which is largely the addiction specialists that are working in this recognize, when you're on your phone and you're upset, someone's making money, right? And so the most you can get stuck in that phone, I mean, they know when you're scrolling, when you're going to hitch on the page slightly. I mean, they can know what you're reading, what things are outraging you, how to push them further. And unfortunately, the more control of that that's given outside to other people, the more we're pushing that forward in the world. So I think look, we've done a lot of polling on this with other work that I do, just pro bono. 80% of Americans agree on almost everything, right? But what we're seeing is there's so much profit to be made by highlighting the differences and getting us anxious or getting us nervous or getting us outraged or giving us exactly what we think we want, that we're pushing those things forward. And community is what we have. It's why we're talking on a podcast. Why are we talking on a podcast about a book, right? There's one book that comes out every year. I write it, and everyone reads the same book and has a different reaction. And it's something that's shared. And we lost a version of this a little bit. When we used to have appointment viewing of who shot JR or what's happening next week with
water cooler moments.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think with streaming now, we have such constipated conversations of like, oh, what are you watching? White Lotus. Well, what app's that on? Oh, don't tell me. I'm in season 1. You're in, like, we can't even talk to each other around stuff. And so,
Oh my God, I just had that conversation. I'm like, don't fucking tell me. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. I mean, but I remember waiting online for, 3 hours to see Tim Burton's Batman. It's like this shared communion, right? What's your favorite part? What happened? There's this momentousness. And now there's times when I'll sit at home and I'm clicking through my Apple TV. I have like $1 trillion of stuff to watch and nothing feels special anymore because I can have it all whenever I want it.
I could feel that.
So I think it's important.
Totally feel that.
It's important for us to remember that part of this is that it's a community. Part of this is we're reading something that someone has written and we get to talk about that and react to it. And that's special.
Yeah. Well, humanity, I think, put a fine point on humanity is a shared experience. And everything that's valuable in humanity is a shared experience, whether it's shared with one person or shared with a group of people. All the things that most people hold dear are a shared experience of some sort. And so, and this AI does not offer that. And that is interesting. I hadn't thought about that element of it. Do you think it's kind of a sort of like a second atomic age in the sense that it's that kind of power, that kind of power that can do wondrous things, but also do horrible things? I mean, is that the closest analog in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, or the Industrial Revolution. I mean, yeah, I think it's another revolution. I mean, look, there's whole fields that will just get wiped out overnight. Well, maybe not overnight, but
did you see AI just with the use of AI, they were able to look at the scrolls from Mount Vesuvius, right?
Yeah.
Right? And they were able to read it for the first time, and it was like,
amazing.
I was reading through that article and I was like, holy crap! I'm like, it's such a wondrous thing that.
That's right. There's amazing stuff that we can do. And there's also stuff, and look, a process of massively accelerated change, in a way we've been living in an idle, I think, since Vietnam. I mean, in some ways since World War II, since the end of World War II, where we've come to expect a certain measure of stability and safety. We haven't had a generationally wide sacrifice, I would say, since World War II. And so we're very accustomed to it. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to have unbelievably complicated social change and financial and operational change that we're going to have to navigate. And, if we can get our act together, we can navigate it well. But, this is a new frontier now. And if we scream at each other and decide that, we're on two sides, it's a zero-sum game, and, everything gets, choked up with codified or outright corruption and bureaucracy and nonsense, we're screwed. But, things are taking off and there's a lot of opportunity. The unknown holds as much opportunity as it does threat. We just tend to think of threat. And I think we've been conditioned that because we've been living through such stability. And it's one of the things I think it draws me a lot to writing this series, because it's like Evan never lived in that world of stability or safety or security. He doesn't take that for granted. And it's good to have a reminder of these characters when confronting things like this, who aren't easily swayed, who aren't easily manipulated, who have their grounding buttoned all the way down.
I like when he goes back to his home and the people are drawing him into the HOA meetings and stuff. And he's just like, what the fuck is going on? Why are these people like all worked up and Botox and HOA president's meetings and stuff? And so it's always
I love that on so many levels. One of the levels I love that on is it illustrates the mundane that we all get caught up in and lose our minds on social media and then wherever, in our office, in our homes, when they're five steps away from us is somebody who's dealing with a literal life and death problem. Now, obviously, it's huge scale, exaggerated with Evan's character, but it's true. Whether it's somebody dealing with a cancer diagnosis or
that's right,
whatever it is, I love the juxtaposition of the mundane and the life or death.
Thank you. I mean, another thing too that I like to humble Evan a lot. And one of the things is he'll be so, and we're laughing with him, like so intensely negatively judgmental about someone and their jackass concerns of the HOA. And then there'll just be this turn where all of a sudden he'll see some hidden vulnerability in them or some other aspect that this person who we've reduced to being a bit comedic player in his much more important narrative, all of a sudden he sees this humanity kind of coming through with them. And it's always this reminder that we never know what's going on in somebody's internal landscape. We don't know what people are dealing with. Everyone's got a story.
Always, yeah. I have that conversation with my son all the time, and it usually centers around people speeding or cutting us off, and then I'm like, you have no idea what's going. Like me being from New Jersey, New York, I want to like flip him off. I envision having machine guns on my car and blowing him up. But I take a step back and I try to be a father to my son and explain things to him, like, hey, the person's got family members in the hospital. You have no idea, and they're rushing to get there, or maybe it's really need to go to the bathroom really bad.
Yeah, maybe it's a little old lady with a fishbowl in her lap.
Yeah, you have no idea.
Too slow.
You have no idea their story. I mean, their story is just as important to them as your story is to yourself. But so going back to the character discussion a little bit, who do you channel when you're writing Joey's dialogue? And do you laugh to yourself when you hear her voice in your head?
Joey sometimes is funnier in real time than I am, which is a blast, So I drop into it. For me, I was hell-bent. That's right over Sean's left shoulder there. Was the first book that introduces her. And I plan to kill her at the end. Crace did this with, Joe Pike was supposed to die at the end of Monkey's Raincoat. It's so funny. We had it's this weird parallel. And you can see the scene in Hellbent right where she was supposed to die. And I couldn't do it because she brought so much out in Evan. Mm-hmm. She brought out so much in him. And she added so much richness to it. And I was like, you got to, I think in some ways being a writer is being open to opportunity. And I'm not going to hammer something through to a preconception that I had. And so I kept her in there, but she's a blast. There's some lines or slang that I borrow from my daughter now and then.
Do you? I thought maybe you would, because I was reading, I'm like, because I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I'm just like, that's something, because she's 12 going on 25. I'm like, that's something my kid would say. I'm like, it's fucking hilarious. Just hilarious, some of the shit that comes out of Joey's mouth and my daughter's mouth.
Yeah. They all are. Girls are terrifying too. They have that goddamn superior EQ, and so. there's times where, you know, they
But
see stuff.
I read the dialogue in her voice, like what I envision her voice to be, which is always fun. Like, you know, the shit that she just throws at Evan, the way she says it, the song for the ringtone, like I just fucking love all of it. She's such a fantastic character.
Thank you.
My eldest is 25 and my youngest is 18. They're the girls, bookend girls and boys in the middle. And there's Joey's very different than both of them, but her ability to reduce Evan to a pile of ash so quickly reminds me so much of my girls.
They're funny, man. They're funny. Yeah, she's a blast to write. You know, I have a great time writing her.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't want to
go
cut you
ahead.
off. I was gonna say, speaking of Joey, do you give a lot of thought into her rate of maturation from book to book? And I asked specifically because in this book, Evan seems to be feeling his age a bit more than usual, as well as the mileage. But are these considerations you just sort of take on organically with each story? Or are you kind of thinking ahead? Oh my gosh, I gotta do this with Joey, you know, soon.
Yeah, I mean, it tends to come upon me a bit more organically. You know, they're not aging in real time. I mean, everyone's getting older, but you know, if it's real time, you know, Peter would be almost 20, and you know, I didn't want to write him as almost 20. Yeah, you know, he's having birthdays, he's getting older. It's paced out a little bit different. But yeah, no, Joey's growing up. And so the dialogue in what's to come and the types of things they're going to be involved with in what's to come are going to change a lot. And that's good, you know, but it's not that she's a year older every book.
All right. Make sure dog isn't a year older either, so he stays around.
Dog the dog, man.
So Greg, what's going on with like screenplays or movie adaptations for Orphan X?
We just closed a deal actually about a week ago, which I think we're going to announce soon. I'm not quite sure if I'm supposed to talk about it publicly yet, but I do think we're going to have some really good news coming soon. So yeah,
we'll edit that down too. We're going to have some really good news coming soon.
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk offline and
so we don't get a publicist yelling at us or something.
Yeah, I don't want to get you in trouble and us banned. So talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But that's fantastic news. It's also fantastic news that you have finished or completed the traditional portion of our interview where we ask serious questions about Lone Wolf. Now we're going to ask you the stupid, silly questions, and hopefully you don't give us erudite answers. You give us stupid, silly answers.
All right. We're aiming for stupid. I can do that.
Because that's my level, Greg. That's my level, Greg.
I got a lot of practice with stupid. So let's go.
All right. So Sophia's dog. Lolo? Is it Loco? Loco, right?
Loco.
So did you have to scour the internet for what that dog looked like, or did you already like know what it looked like in your head?
No. My godson, who lived with us for 3.5 years at different stages, had these 2 goddamn mutt chihuahuas. So I have these incredibly elegant Rhodesian Ridgebacks. They're like these exotic African animals, right? It's like having a great cat. They pose like they're waiting for you to paint them in oil. And he had this scruffy little dogs with a carbuncle on its nose, deranged snaggletooth that glared and quivered. So I had the template, and so I'd come down and the dogs would just lose their mind. These little dogs. So I had them, and I kind of thought, what's the perfect thing to make even more ridiculous the fact that he's going to begin this book having to hunt for a dog? It's that he'd have to hunt for that dog.
The dog that just loves Sophia to no end. He's like, this is ridiculous.
That's right.
I love it. All right. So has Gregg Hurwitz ever ordered something and had it delivered to his front door by a robot?
No.
What's the likelihood in the future you will?
Probably not in my neighborhood, because we're up on a hill right now that is right now we got streaming mudslides in the backyard. So if I vanish off screen rapidly, you'll know why. But I'm just not in a robot zone that robots are going to do deliveries.
They'd run out of battery.
It's not location wise. If I was in New York or if I was in the city, I'd say yeah.
All right. And then your dog gets whatever. Here's my last question. A 5-worded chapter Did they teach that in Harvard?
No.
What about the word enormouser? Did they teach that?
No, they didn't teach me that either.
Like,
But I do like,
I do
you
love
know,
it though.
I like playing around with language, it's fun.
No, I giggle. I get to those chapters, several chapters where you have, it's like sleeping or resting or whatever, or the 5-worded chapters, and I'm just like, fucking Gregg Hurwitz, I fucking love it. And then you write words that don't exist, and I'm like, Gregg Hurwitz can do that, and I love it. It's fucking awesome.
Well, thank you.
Johnny,
right,
what do you got?
My first one is Carissa, Joey, or Candy. Rate them from most formidable on down.
Ooh, Candy's at the top. Physically, meaning menacingly.
However you want to interpret that. Because if
Well,
you had to pick your wingman, it would probably be Joey, even though she's not the most physical.
that's right. I would say I'm going to have to go with menace or dangerous physically, and that would be Candy. Candy probably still edges out the wolf, and then Joey afterwards.
Yeah, I found myself not comparing, wanting to see Candy and Carissa fight as I started.
Yeah, that'd be a hell of a girl fight, boy.
Okay, now if you had to make a deep fake of someone to influence the world, who would it be, and what in general would you have them say?
This question is designed to get me into so much trouble.
Brother,
You can pass. You can pass.
Don't pass. No,
It
this
can
is
be
a
historical. It can be
John,
it
this is
can be
a
historical.
clip. We specifically asking this question. We make a clip and it goes fucking viral. And Gregg Hurwitz is
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's like I might as well, might as well like have me in a Proud Boy t-shirt, just in terms of level.
You've thought about it though. You have thought about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know how I would start a war. I mean, yeah, I think I know a lot more for menace than otherwise is what I have my eye on with deep fakes.
By the way, way before deep fakes became a thing, I wrote a short story, and it was when Osama was still on the loose, and it was the government hired Hollywood to make a fake videotape of Osama bin Laden saying something that basically divided his followers, and it was like this stupid. I mean, it wasn't that good, but it was a good concept at the time. All right, my last question is a very easy one. You have to buy 2 dogs, and they can't be Rhodesian Ridgebacks. What breed are you buying?
That's not easy. What do you mean that's easy?
I
love Great Danes. I get one Great Dane.
I have one.
And I like those big mountain dogs. What are they?
Yeah. My sister raises
Burnett. Yeah, they're amazing. They're amazing. So I love big dogs, man. And Ridgebacks are part Great Dane. We have a scrappy little mutt now. Speaking of, not quite as ugly as Loco, but we have a little rescue.
Gregg Hurwitz is so
funny.
mutt?
She's like 20 pounds, and she's a scruff. She looks like a scribble. She looks like Benji, and she's really cute. But it's really funny because I'll be out hiking them, and I have my 2 Ridgebacks who are looking very esteemed and purebred, and then I got Lily looking half deranged. So it's pretty fun.
Do you have to pick her up and like put her in your backpack?
Now and then. I mean, we got a lot of owls out here.
Oh no shit! You don't worry about
just
that.
Crossed the line. We had to look it up. We get a lot of hawks and a lot of owls. So I always get nervous with the Ridgebacks, and then there's a certain point where it's like, okay, now the birds need to worry.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen with her. But I think she's over the weight that we're still okay now. But it's
you ended up rescuing her.
Yeah.
By the way, I have the perfect endorsement deal for you. Have you worn a Roback shirt?
I love Roback, man.
Okay.
I love them.
You should reach out to them because honestly, you're like you could get free gear and put their stuff in your book.
He doesn't need free gear. Look at him. It's Gregg Hurwitz.
No, but I mean, hey, well, I mean, whether he needs it.
I love their stuff, man.
Roback stuff's still pricey, no matter.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Great
Yeah,
stuff.
I like them.
Hey, Greg, you're amazing, dude. You're one of my favorite authors, if not my favorite. I have all of your books, your comic books, like whatever you write, dude. I'm reading. It was a pleasure having you on the show to talk about Lone Wolf. It's another great addition to the Orphan X series. So I'm going to raise a glass to you of not vodka, but of bourbon. Cheers.
Well, if there are readers ours that have not started this series, or not readers of ours, viewers of ours, if not started this series, get your ass off your couch and go buy Orphan X and freaking power read through all of it. It's as good as it gets.
Cheers,
Absolutely,
Greg.
gentlemen. Always a pleasure talking to you.
This is
Fun.
you.
I know it's me. Did you see the title of this chapter?
No, I don't swear.
God. No, I'm just asking if you saw it.
I can't even
I
read it.
believe Gregg Hurwitz wrote that. The language, Evan, language. Fucking love Joey. So anyway, Sean, we had Gregg Hurwitz, who friend of the show, one of our favorite authors, writes an amazing story in Lone Wolf. We get to talk to him for an hour. We get to talk to him for a little bit after that too. So it's great that Greg would spend some extra time with us, talking about things that are going on in the world. The blood coming down the side of his house because California's got those mudslides. But let's raise the glass and thank Gregg Hurwitz coming on the show. Unfortunately, Mike didn't get to share in this interview.
He'll be here next time, I think. I hope.
I hope so. But cheers. Thanks again, Greg. Lone Wolf people, go out and buy it next time.
Absolutely.